Take two. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. On today's episode of me talking about 7 things, I'm going to be doing a recap of episode 1 of season 18 of Naked and Afraid. That's right, after many months of waiting, we have some new Naked and Afraid content. And before I continue, link below are some referral links and a survey link. Please check those out if you haven't already. Now on to the episode. We have the first bilateral amputee on Naked and Afraid, and that is Mandy. She is a mountaineer. She even climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. We also get Mandy's backstory into how she became a bilateral amputee and how she was struck by a locomotive, and she had passed away 3 times after the incident, but she was able to be resuscitated, and she even had to be re-amputated a year after healing. And the event in which that happened, I'm not going to repeat because it was a very traumatic situation that happened, and I don't have the verbiage or nuance to say it eloquently as I could. So please watch the episode to get the full backstory. But Mandy is an incredible human being, and she has accomplished so many things, and good for her for taking on this challenge and being willing to do it. And she had the option to use her prosthetic legs in the challenge, but because they're expensive and logistics, and I believe they ran on batteries, and just because she didn't want them to get damaged, she decided to opt for not using them, but was allowed gloves. And then we have Jonny, who was in the military, and I would like to commend Naked and Afraid on the casting for this episode, because there could have been a very bad partner for Mandy who was very mean to her, or was not the best partner to her, or was condescending to her. But Jonny was a really great partner. He was not a jerk to her, and Mandy and Jonny got along really well, which is really nice. And so after their brief meeting, they decide to go look for a water source. They are in Central America, Belize more specifically, and they are tasked with surviving 21 days there. And, you know, we get the B-roll footage of, oh, this dangerous fertile ants, this dangerous jaguar, look at all these bugs. And because Mandy has had her legs amputated, she's closer to the ground, so she has a lot more to worry about when it comes to dirt and creatures on the ground and whatnot. And also, because her blood circulates faster, if she were to get bitten by a snake, it would hurt her faster. And so luckily that doesn't happen. She's fine. She didn't get any snake bites, so that's good. And so they managed to make it to their water source, and they start setting up a camp, and Mandy's able to create a fire. And the interesting thing about this episode is that the majority of the episode takes place on the first 3 days. So I think a little bit more than halfway through the episode, we're in the first 3 days, and that could be a little bit worrisome, because the more time you spend on the earlier days, you might think they may tap out. But I was thinking, okay, we may not be getting those episodes, but we may do what's called fast forwarding, where we just jump several days in advance, get a little vignette, jump a few days in advance, get a vignette. And I believe one of the reasons why they focused on the first 3 episodes was to focus on Mandy getting to the campsite. And there was a point where Jonny helped her out because there was a sea of ants at one point, and so Jonny gave her a piggyback ride, and so that was very nice of him. Again, the partnership between these two was really great. He was very helpful, and she is very knowledgeable and was able to take charge, and Jonny did not have an ego at all. He was listening to her and taking her directions and doing what he was told, and also pulling his weight as well in the challenge. So just a good partnership overall. And then I also wanted to point out that there's a point where Jonny has a bandage on his foot that isn't explained. So maybe early on he injured his foot and he needed it wrapped up, and Mandy early on had her hand wrapped up, but nothing's ever explained. A lot of stuff is cut out of editing. And I also wanted to mention how on day 3, I believe, there's a point where Jonny believes he finds heart of palm, and he takes a bite out of it, which is a big no-no, because it turns out it wasn't heart of palm. It may have been elephant ear. And so he bit into it. There were some toxins that got in his mouth, but luckily he didn't tap. And that's a good lesson, because if there is a food or plant that you think is edible, you do what's called the poison test, or I think it's called the poison test. But basically what you do is you kind of break the plant open, you rub it on your skin, see if you have a reaction. If you don't have a reaction, you rub the plant on your lips, and if there's not a burning sensation or weird tingling sensation, then you take a bite out of it and spit it out. And then it's just a slow process to see if the plant or fruit or vegetable or tuber is edible or not. And unfortunately, he did not do that, and he paid the price for it. But luckily, he got to stay in the challenge, which is really good. And Mandy brought a fishing hook and line with her for her survival item. And early on, we were shown her not getting any fish, but luckily, Jonny and her were able to gather up a lot of snails, so they were able to eat on that. And later on in the challenge, Mandy does catch a fish. We only see her catching one fish. She could have caught more, but it's good to see that she caught a fish and that they were able to get some protein in the challenge, because protein is very important in these challenges. And after the first 3 days and Jonny taking a bite out of the elephant ear and dealing with the consequences of that, there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of suffering, and then there's a point where a lot of bugs are attacking the survivalists, and so they needed to increase the amount of smoke to get the bugs away, but Mandy kept having to inhale the smoke because she wasn't able to get away from it, because if she got away from it, there would be bugs, but then the smoke, she would inhale it, and so she was having a difficult time with the smoke inhalation. And then she was also diagnosed with PTSD and had phantom pain. So there would be points where she would just be in a lot of pain just by being in the environment because it was very uncomfortable. And later on, you kind of get the sense that she's emotionally breaking down a little bit, but she's able to pick herself up and not tap. I think had she had the feelings of being down earlier on in the challenge, I'd be super worried. But usually female survivalists, if they're in like late stage mental downturn, they're able to pull themselves back up from it. So luckily she was able to pull herself out from the negative emotions and the pain, and she was able to pull through. And luckily they both make it to day 21. They get to their extraction and they make it through the challenge. Mandy is the first bilateral amputee to complete a challenge on Naked and Afraid. Jonny had no ego. He was a great partner, very supportive, and he also made it through the challenge. Mandy started with an initial PSR of 6.7 and ended with 7.1. Jonny started out with a PSR of 6.5 and ended with a 6.9. So good for them for completing the challenge, their increase in PSRs. I think that eating the elephant ear might have harmed Jonny's PSR a little bit, but luckily it didn't drop like Fernando's did after he ate the mushrooms, because Fernando's PSR dropped after he ate some mushrooms on his 21-day challenge. But luckily, both their PSRs increased. They did really well. They dealt with bugs. There was a lot of rain a lot of the time, and they weren't able to get fire most of the time, but they persevered and they completed the challenge. Good for them. I also wanted to say I think it's very interesting how the episode was an hour and 15 minutes long, and the majority of it was spent on the first 3 days of the challenge. I guess it was to build tension, and it's one of those episodes where it could have been 2 hours and it would have made sense and it wouldn't have been boring and enough would have been happening. But I guess they wanted to build the tension of the elephant ear. They wanted to build the tension when Mandy wasn't doing too great mentally later in the challenge, but they ended up doing well. And I think that if they could have extended the episode, because in the past they could have 2-hour episodes that could be a little bit boring, but I don't think this would have been boring. But I'm very happy for these two and that they made it through. I look forward to more episodes. Episode 2, my good pal Ernie is on it. That's right, one of the admins to true fans of Naked and Afraid went on a challenge. I'm not going to say if he completed it or not, but I think he did. And my predictions, I said he did. But yeah, that's exciting. Thank you all so much for listening. Please like, comment nice things, and subscribe. And click the next video if it's mine. Thank you. Bye-bye.